tonight, our guest almost needs no introduction. He's the author of Guardians of the Holy Grail, The Knights Templar, John the Baptist, and the Water of Life. His resume goes on and on. He's an accomplished author and spiritual teacher, and he presents a history of the Knights Templar and the legendary Holy Grail like none ever before. His website's listed on our website at X Squared Radio, and the book is available, I assume, everywhere. We'll talk to him in just a moment. Anyway, Mark Pinkham, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you, Brooks. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm fabulous because the weather is fabulous outside. We're in sunny Sedona here.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, Sedona, I've heard about that place. A very spiritual mecca, it seems, in this country.
Well, yeah, and, there's some major claims that are made about it, and I would say that the majority of them are true. Okay, that's what I have to say about it, because the energy is very powerful, and in the first couple days you can expect to keep looking down at your feet to see if they're touching the ground, because it feels like you're walking at least a couple feet off the ground.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I've been through your book, Guardians of the Holy Grail, many times. Each time I go through this, I find something else that makes me wonder about the powers that men have had in their hands. It seems that tens of millions of people have been fascinated and even scared by these powers. Recently, we had a movie made of a best-selling book about the Da Vinci Code, and when I was in Roslyn Chapel about a year and a half ago, I saw your book for sale in their little bookstore. That little facility has been visited by millions of people making a pilgrimage to find out about this mystery. And I was going to tell you, in one of these renditions, we were treated to the idea that Mary Magdalene herself was the Grail. Well, let's talk about that. What do you say about that?
Well, Brooks, that whole idea of Mary Magdalene being the Grail started basically with the publication of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which is early 1980s. And it was based upon the research that the three authors had done, and they'd come across some documents in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris that they believed at the time to be true and authentic. Now they're saying that they feel like they were bogus documents, but at the time, they were convinced they were accurate, and they started talking about, well, an ancient bloodline. And so they investigated these documents, and one thing led to another. I'm pretty sure they decided that Jesus and Mary did marry, and that they had or created a bloodline between them. And one of the main reasons that they came to this conclusion, I think that a lot of it was not very well supported, but one of the main reasons they came to it was because they believe that in the ancient legends of the Holy Grail that were written in 1300s, that the true writing of Holy Grail, which of course we know it is Sang Grail, should be Sang Real, which means blood royal. And so they were saying there was some kind of conspiracy, or there was some kind of covert activity going on in order to change that, to make it Sang Real, make it Holy Grail rather than Blood Royal.
I see.
So I think that a lot of it was not very well supported, and within the last few years, they've actually come out and said, well, we found out that these documents we found in the Bibliothèque Nationale aren't exactly authentic, and it looks like they were planted by a man named Pierre Pelletier, or Plantard, his name. Pierre Plantard, who at the time called himself the head of the Priory of Sion, and said that the Priory of Sion had been guarding the bloodline of Jesus and Mary for virtually thousands of years. Well, Pierre Plantard eventually recanted his statements, and then he died right after.
Oh, my goodness! So he recanted his statements that they were false, and then before giving
he recanted his statement that they were true. That
I see.
That there was a bloodline, that there was the prior of Sion. Just before he died, he said, well, okay, let me revise my statements. Actually, the prior of Sion has only existed since the 1800s with Bernard Saunier down in Rennes-le-Château. Okay, it existed at that time. It didn't really go all the way back as far as I said it did before, and that's kind of how it was left. That somehow or another it was in existence during the time of Saunier, and then Tar died, and that was the end of that. Well, anybody who's done any research can see that there was a prior of Sion in the Holy Land. It appears as though it could have been connected to the same kind of the same people he said it was. But it was a monastery. It was a monastic community. It only existed until 1188 when the Muslims reclaimed the Holy Land, and then the monks left, and it looks like they went down to Calabria in Italy, and some went to Orleans in France. But that was basically the last you really hear of it.
Wow.
And it wasn't really subversive, covert sort of secret society either. It was just a monastic community. So, there isn't any hardcore evidence to support that idea anymore, which is one reason that we're having a Holy Grail conference in Glastonbury this summer in July. We're going to bring together a lot of the major speakers on the Holy Grail over the years, Lynn Picknick, Clive Prince, Christopher Knight, Andrew Sinclair, myself, and we're going to really try to present truly what is the Holy Grail and the aftermath of all this stuff, all this what we consider to be this misinformation, saying that the Holy Grail was simply the body of Mary Magdalene. Trying to get people back on track and trying to really clarify what truly is the Holy Grail, because all you have to do is go back and start reading some of the texts that came out during the 1300s, like Per Lesvos. That was a rendition of the Holy Grail that said that there was actually 5 forms of the Holy Grail.
Yeah, how many different kinds of grails are there?
Right, there's all kinds of grails. Well, after a number of texts came out saying there's many forms, they decided, well, there's 4 main forms, and then you've got the chalice, you've got the spear, you've got the rock, and you've got the sword. Those are 4 main forms of the Holy Grail. And from that point on, it was just assumed that yes, there's at least 4 forms, and probably a lot more. And this carried right down to the present time almost, until these people come along and say, no, that's all wrong. There's only one Holy Grail, and that's the body of Mary Magdalene.
Well, yeah, but I often look at who's got the most to gain by that decision coming out. In statistics, sometimes when you say, 4 out of 5 dentists say this, and then you see that, they're recommending a toothpaste for which 4 out of 5 of them held stock in the company, it kind of throws the statistics off. So I kind of follow the money when it comes to stuff like this. Who is it? Is it the church? Is it the government? Is it royalty that's saying this or that or the other thing is the Grail, and does it give them any specific power over the people or some special notoriety?
Well, it gave power to Pierre Plantard, is what it did.
Right.
He claimed that he was in that lineage, that royal lineage that goes all the way to Jesus and Mary, so he had claims to the throne of France.
Yeah,
that's who was benefiting by it.
Well, I mean, when I grew up Catholic, and I'm not Catholic now, but I grew up Catholic, and I was taught by my teachers that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute who Jesus took mercy on, and she was featured in the rock opera about Jesus. I think it was Jesus Christ Superstar. So who was Mary, really? I mean, what was the thing that made Mary Magdalene so powerful and so frightening to the church?
Well, I think that the Gnostic texts that have come out in the last 50 years kind of say it all. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Philip, they all point to Mary having been one of the closest, if not the closest disciple to Jesus, and also that it's said that he loved her more than all the other disciples. He would kiss her directly on the lips, and that he actually told her some secrets that he didn't tell any of his other disciples. It's right in the Gnostic Gospels. Of course, you know that during all these different councils of Nicaea, all these different texts were thrown out. All the Gospels were thrown out because it was saying things like that. It was saying how powerful Mary was. Well, in our tradition, you see, ours is a tradition that actually
was get to my family's location, which was a little town called Stranraer on the western coast of Scotland. They were the hereditary sheriffs of Galloway, and I just kind of wanted to get back to my roots. Well, we went to Rosslyn Chapel first, spent about 5.5 hours there outside of Edinburgh, and then we drove to Stranraer. Well, when I finally found the castle, I noticed that on the castle outside were the same coat of arms and things that I found at Rosslyn Chapel. And then I did some digging, and I found out they were the hereditary sheriffs of Galloway, that they were the magistrates over most land transfers in the 13th and 14th centuries. And I did some more digging and found out that, let's see, it was Edward the Bruce and Sir Andrew Agnew were very close and worked with those that built Rosslyn Chapel as protectors, as knights, and that they were Templars. So I thought, oh my goodness, I'm more tied into this than I ever thought. And we looked at documents, we looked at things that were in the museum there in Stranraer, and there in what we would call a town square in the United States is a little castle called John's Castle, and it sits over the town spring, which I guess was the source of fresh water for the townspeople. So here is all this synchronicity with everything that's going on in the Da Vinci world in a town 70 miles to the west of Rosslyn. So I've been trying to do some research. It's one of my fascinations about having you on the program, because you're the renowned expert. You're the one that knows, what the Templars were doing and why they were had the appearance of being so powerful.
Well, it sounds like you're one of us, Brooks. Get ready for lots of censure.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Well, I don't know. I'm just a silly talk radio host, a physicist with delusions of grandeur, I should say. I took a class recently, and somebody in the class said something about Mary being part of the Church of Seven Demons. There's a Church of Seven Demons in France. And I think it's called the Church of Mary, or Mary's Church, or Mary's School. I can't remember what it was called in French, but it's common knowledge that Mary Magdalene was actually married to Jesus. And
well, yeah, it's becoming common knowledge that she was referred to as his companion in the Gnostic texts, and companion meant the same as wife in the time that the Gospels were written. It's becoming common knowledge that she was a very wealthy person, came from a very wealthy family, and that the Magdalene was actually a title. It was kind of a regal title and a title of her spiritual advancement. Right after the supposed ascension of Jesus, John the Apostle and Mary Magdalene, they were kind of inseparable for a long time because they were the two heads of the lineage at that point. And they went up to Ephesus and hung out there, and later on they became the kind of the patron and patroness of all the Gnostic sects, right? And Mary became associated with Sophia. She was recognized as an incarnation of the goddess Sophia, the Gnostic goddess Sophia.
Oh,
and
really?
She was also recognized as an incarnation of Venus. I mean, she had all these kind of titles that were attributed to her by the Gnostics eventually. So she was considered to be just one of the most incredible incarnations of the goddess of all time. And she was recognized as incarnation of Venus for two reasons. One of which is because Venus is the planet of passion and love, and of course that's what Mary was associated with, whether you consider her to be the wife of Jesus or a prostitute. She definitely was associated with that kind of energy. But it was more than that. The Gnostics and the alchemists considered Venus to be the star of alchemy, they called it. And just by its cycles and its movements in the heavens, it gives a lot of alchemical information. The energy of Venus is to bring things together. It's the power of attraction. Well, that's what alchemy is all about. You try to attract two polar opposite substances together, merge them together into one chemical stone, a philosopher's stone, or elixir. So you call upon that energy of love or that energy of passion. So you call upon, if you're an alchemist, you call upon Mary. You call upon the goddess Mary, Saint Mary Magdalene. Go ahead.
I was going to say, a lot of people ask me the question, because I have a degree in chemistry and physics. They ask me, all right, what is alchemy really? I mean, are you turning lead into gold? What is the big thing? Why don't you just go dig the gold up? And I said, well, my study is that relative to the Templars and relative to the ancient art of alchemy, it is not just base metals into gold. It's creating value out of nothing. And it seems that the medieval Templars, the 14th and 15th century Templars, did figure out how to do that. And all you have to do is look at the dollar bill and look at all the Freemasonry, the Masonic symbols all over the dollar bill, which is generally just paper. It's not backed really by anything. It's just,
we know that, yeah.
It's just backed by the talismans that are on the dollar bill.
That's right. No, there's no question, Brooks, that the Templars were experts in alchemy. They studied with many Sufi sects in the Middle East, and at that time the Sufis were the greatest alchemists all over the world. They had gone all over Egypt and India and the Middle East, and they had gathered together all the sacred alchemical texts and brought them back to the Middle East and cataloged them, filed them away, and they became the teachers of the Templars. Geber, he was one of the greatest alchemists at that time. There was all kinds of Sufi alchemists running around the Middle East when the Templars were there. And so they got a lot of information that way, but they also received information about alchemy from this lineage, this Gnostic lineage, because Jesus actually practiced a form of yoga, and he was also very adept at alchemy. I mean, Jesus was an Essene. What do you think they were doing down on the Dead Sea? They were actually using that sea salt to create the alchemical elixir. So all this information was passed to the Templars, because the Templars became what we call Gnostics. Their search was to awaken centers. Psychics was all about, but in order to awaken those centers, you've got to go through the process of alchemy, which is yoga. Yoga is a form of alchemy, which is creating the alchemical pill or the alchemical elixir. I think the Templars were adept in all forms of alchemy. But you see, the Gnostic path, the alchemical path, they're two sides of the same coin. You can't get completely established in that wisdom, that Gnostic wisdom of I am God or I am the universe, unless you go through the alchemical transformation to get you to it. You see.
So you're saying that the alchemical process is not just to create wealth; it's to create immortality?
Absolutely. If you go back to the East, the alchemy has existed in the East for thousands of years. They don't care anything about using alchemy to transmute lead into gold. They don't care anything about that. They care about using it to transmute a human into a god being, a divine being. That's what all they care about alchemy for, and it's been existing there for many thousands of years before we had it in the West.
Well,
it's only when it really got to the West that they really started using it for that. I mean, they used it a little bit in China for that, but it was mostly the Taoist masters and the Taoist philosophers that were using it there. And in India, it was mostly the sages of South India, the Siddhas, those practicing the Rastrayana path. It was primarily a path to enlightenment, is what it was.
Well, there are those that say that young Jesus and possibly his brother left Egypt and went to the East to learn from the time, I guess he was about 14 to the time he was about 28 and a half. Are you saying that maybe he went to the East to learn from these very masters?
Well, you couldn't avoid it. That's what was happening all over India. Was You see, the Taoists, it was the Buddhists actually that started writing these texts called the Tantras. And in the Tantras was all this information about how you could transform yourself into a divine being, how you could essentially evolve yourself. There was alchemy, there was yoga, there was chanting, there was all this stuff, and they started actually putting these texts together, these tantras, right around the time that Jesus was there. And we know that Jesus, when he was there, he did study with the Buddhists, and those were some of his primary teachers. And besides studying, it looks like from the Brahmin priests of the Hindu tradition, but definitely with the Buddhists, and they were the ones at that time that had that alchemical yoga information, and they were these tantric sects all over India. So Jesus couldn't have helped but have been exposed to that when he was over there. There's no question. But we also know that there was a kind of a Jewish yoga that he practiced too, that the Essenes were practicing, because later on Moses de Leon, it looks like, or some of the other Jews in Spain started repopularizing this ancient form of yoga that had been passed down through their lineage to them, and it appears as though so many of the Essenes and Jesus and so many of the prophets had been practicing this form of yoga. Where it came from, we don't know for sure. It could have come from Egypt. It could have come from the East. It could have maybe even come from Sumeria. It's hard to say. But there was a huge mixing of information in the Middle East, as you can imagine. It's a crossroads of East and West. And so you get all this Egyptian, Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Persian, Chinese, Hindu information, all of it's passed through there, and it was synthesized. It was actually, when the Templars were in the Middle East, it was the Sufis that actually had synthesized all that information. And they'd done an amazing job. They were really the first ones to have accomplished that, and they were the direct teachers of the Templars.
Well, I know we talk about Gnostics, and really that just means, knowers or special knowledge or secret knowledge, but this knowledge may have been known by lots of people. It seems that powerful people since those days have wanted to possess these things. Is there any real power in possession of any of these holy grails today?
Well, there is. I mean, the idea is that what makes something a holy grail is that it has a certain power, it has a certain energy, right? So you want to get a hold of Jesus' cup and drink from it because it's full of spiritual energy, or you want to get hold of some of the relics of the Passion. You want to get a hold of the crown of thorns, or the shroud of Turin, or the veil of Veronica, or wood of the cross, or nails of the cross. Any of that stuff is believed to be full of that power, that energy. But how it got that power, how did any of these Holy Grail manifestations get that power, is mainly because they were in proximity to Jesus. He either touched them, or his blood and sweat were, filled them up, or something. But just by being on his body or around him, he was able to infuse them with his own spiritual power, and that's what really gives them that energy. That, to my mind, what is the true Holy Grail is that energy itself. It's the power. It's the power of the Holy Spirit. It's in one of the Grail texts, it talks about how the Holy Grail stone is rejuvenated or re-energized every year. It was the Holy Spirit dove that come down and lights on top of it and infuses it with that energy. It's a pure Holy Spirit energy, which in the East they know as Kundalini power. And Kundalini power is the same kind of power that any kind of magician or shaman wants to develop, because once it's developed, then they can manifest things out of thin air if they want. It's like the same kind of power that this being Sai Baba today. He's constantly manifesting ash or gold watches or whatever out of thin air. Sir, masters throughout time have always wanted to get hold of that energy, that power, because you can, create universes with it, basically. And unfortunately, during the time of Atlantis and some of the earlier times, it was used for selfish purposes. And that is one reason that the patriarchal forces at the time decided to downplay that whole goddess tradition and denigrate the goddess, because that whole tradition of working with power comes directly out of the goddess tradition, because it was known that that power was her. You see, all the goddess traditions are all about awakening the inner power, using the power for healing, for magic, whatever. Even today in Wicca and witchcraft, it's like generating that power so you can use it for manifestation purposes.
Well,
and this is one reason that the church denigrated the goddess, put her down, because once you get that power awakened within you, it opens you up to your own gnosis, your own understanding. Then they can't control your thinking.
Yeah, then you don't need the church anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I guess I could go a lot of places with this, but one of the things that my listeners want me to ask you is, in your opinion, from your studies and from things that you may know that you didn't put in your book, is there real power in the things, or is it just the love that was around the union of Jesus and his apostles, or Jesus and his mate Mary? Was it the love, or is it the things that he touched that have the power?
No, I think there's no question it was the things that he touched. I mean, the tradition of the Holy Grails have been around for thousands of years. They weren't just in Middle East. In fact, they predated Jesus by thousands of years. I mean, there was a Holy Grail in Persia, and there was a whole knighted order that tried to get a hold of it even before the time of Jesus. There was the cup of Buddha in Mongolia and China that had these divine powers because it had been blessed by Buddha. There was a cup in Sumeria that everyone wanted to get a hold of because it had these divine powers. But what gave it these divine powers is some great master just infused his energy into it. And what I believe, is that the original Holy Grails were not objects. The original Holy Grails were the masters themselves. They were full of the power. They were chalices themselves, full of this power, which they knew when they called the water of life. They called it the water of life. So they were chalices full of the water of life.
Wow.
And you talk, and if you read between the lines in the Holy Grail text, it says that the true guardian of the Holy Grail is the Fisher King, right? The Fisher King is the original priest kings. He represents all the original priest kings that used to rule this planet that were full of this power. It was their power that kept their kingdom prosperous and alive. You study all the ancient cultures. It was the kings. It was their power that made their country flourish. And when they turned from the will of God, they became self-serving. Then they lost their power, and that's what happened to the Fisher King in the Grail text. He became the crippled Fisher King because he was using the power for his own means.
Well, it seems, as I study history in high school and college and books that I've read after that as somewhat of an aficionado, that all kinds of military ventures from the Crusades on up to World War II, the tyrants or those with whom the world was at war were actively seeking these talismans to give them special power in ruling the world, but not for the benefit and charity of mankind, for their own enrichment. It just seems like a lot of that has gone on.
Well, there's no question about it. And they knew that if they got a hold of these talismans, it was all over. Hitler hung around the Spear of Destiny. We know all about that. That had been passed down among the Holy Roman Empires and went down back to King Constantine. He knew that once he had possession of that, he would rule the world. Well, there was also there was called the Chintamani stone in the east, and legend was that was in this mythical place called Shambhala. And it had mystical powers, this stone, and it actually come from another world. It come from star of Sirius, and actually pieces of that stone were sent to Solomon and Genghis Khan and some of these other famous rulers, and it was because of the power of that stone that they were able to rule the great kingdoms and defeat their enemies the way they were.
Yeah, I know
and
another.
You find this continually all over the world. Yeah.
Oh yeah, another famous stone. It was just recently, relatively speaking, returned to Scotland, and that's the Stone of Destiny, the Stone of Scone.
Well, that's right. Yeah, but any research up there will tell you that's not the real one.
It probably isn't, but I did go through the castle at Edinburgh, and it does look authentic, and I got a little replica of it on my bookshelf. But the story behind
but most people tell you it's a fake. Actually, Niven Sinclair has been researching that for quite a while, and what his research has shown is that the original stone of Scone was actually divided up into 7 pieces, right, and given to the 7 major clans in Scotland. And whenever they came together to make the laws and the rules of Scotland, they would bring their piece of the stone and they would join it together.
Wow.
And so he was saying, well, the Sinclairs still have their piece of the stone. Of course, he's not telling me where it is, but that's what he found out when he researched that.
Well, I understand that all the kings of England have been crowned sitting or standing or with that stone underneath their throne.
Right.
That's
it. What they've got is sandstone right now. I mean, I've been around that stone a few times, and granted, sandstone can accumulate some energy, some power, but it doesn't hold a candle to a meteorite, as an example.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Or a stone that has a lot more metal associated to it. I think it was originally actually a meteorite, because if you go back to Middle East, at the time when this Stone of Destiny supposedly was taken out of the Holy Land, during the time of the prophet Jeremiah and Princess Tamra, all the famous stones of power, they were meteorites. Right? They were all meteorites.
Wow.
And they would fall on the ground, and they would be associated with Venus, the star of alchemy. And then they would oftentimes either they would be put into a temple, or they'd be used for initiation in mystery schools, like the thunders of nocturnal Zeus in Crete. All around the Mediterranean, people would flock there to get initiation, because the dactyloi who was doing the initiation, they would take out this gigantic meteorite, place it on your back, and it was so powerful, had such a concentration of nickel and iron, that immediately it would interact with your electromagnetic field and get everything pulsing. And when you move energy in that level of your being, it starts moving it in the higher level, more etheric level, and that's the level that Kundalini exists within. So you start moving and awakening the Kundalini as well, and that's what happened to most everybody. So these were very, very important sacred stones. Even in the Samothracian mysteries, those were the ones that came directly from Atlantis, and these were all about Kundalini awakening. They used meteorites, and they would have meteorite stones that the initiates would wear with them. They could continually contact the Samothrace twins whenever they were in trouble or needed help or needed more spiritual power. But you'll find it was primarily the meteorites that were the really powerful sacred stones at that time.
So they would see them flame down through the atmosphere and mount a caravan to go see if they could find that meteorite that fell.
That's it. It was based on the old legend of Cronus cutting off his dad's genitals, right? And then they come flaming down and land in the Mediterranean, and out comes Venus. That's how she was born, right?
Do you think that...
since there weren't a lot of flaming genitals coming down through the heavens, they decided, well, it must be the meteorites.
Do you think the star that led the wise men to Bethlehem was a meteorite or a UFO? Or, I mean, it couldn't have been a star, because the wise men didn't show up until Jesus was about 2 years old. So it took them a long time. I just doubt that a star would have led wise men from that far away, and they had to have some kind of record that told them what the star was going to mean, and Herod's priests had the same records. So, of course, we don't have those records today.
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly what it is if you subscribe to the idea that the wise men came right after Jesus' birth, then it was probably a conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter. This is known in the East in Vedic astrology as the herald of some great teacher, great master that's going to be born here on this planet. It happens very, very rarely. Otherwise, if it was later on, there's a good chance that it could have been it could have been the planet Venus, or it could have very well have been a UFO. I think that there's a lot of evidence to support the idea that they were led there by extraterrestrial craft too.
Yeah, well, we can go into that in depth, but as we finish off this hour, let's jump a little bit ahead. Let's talk about the Cathars. Who are they, and how did they gain their knowledge? Or are they called the Cathars?
The Cathars, basically they referred to them as Manichaeism. Mani was he was born into a Gnostic family. His father was a Mandean, and his mother was of Persian royalty, and he became a Gnostic and an alchemist, and he actually created the biggest, until that time, the biggest religion throughout the world. It extended all the way from Spain to China. I mean, just gigantic, but it's very much of a Gnostic religion. Well, so there were Manichaean worshippers in Europe, and apparently they slowly but surely they evolved into the Cathars, and the Cathars were primarily in the Languedoc, southern France, and they were great goddess worshippers, and I think part of that is because there had been a goddess tradition there. It existed for thousands of years as well. I mean, they have done some landscape surveying there, and they've discovered this huge kind of landscape five-pointed star, symbol of the goddess, within which they had been apparently doing goddess rituals there for, thousands of years. So they were goddess lovers. Apparently they knew a lot of the secrets of Jesus and Mary Magdalene because those secrets had come up through France. They knew that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were, in truth, had been married. But the main thing is that they were Gnostics, and they didn't feel like they needed any kind of ritual. Their church was the world. Their church was the most beautiful place they could find out in nature. That was their church.
Wow. Did they come from Jerusalem?
Well, no. They were French people, but the Manichaean religion came from the Middle East. It came from what's now Iraq and went west.
So how did they find out who Mary really was and what she had with her?
Well, because it appears as though I believe there was documents and about who Mary was. I mean, this whole area of Languedoc, it was once called Septimania, that was actually believed to have been ruled over by a Jewish king at that time. This is a time of about the time of Charlemagne, you see, and so it looks like there was a lot of documents, hidden Jewish documents that existed in that area before the Cathars arrived there.
I see.
So I believe that they were actually able to get a hold of a lot of those documents.
Do you think?
But anyway, they two things. They were destroyed by the church for one, because they didn't want to follow any kind of ritual or doctrine or anything. They didn't want to be controlled by the church. And also, they believed that they were from the true spirit world, and they wanted to go back there, just like all Gnostics do. But this world was ruled by a very evil dictator, which they associate with being the Christian Jehovah, or Yod-Vode, or Yahweh.
Wow.
And so to them, he was the true devil.
Now, do you think they had possession of Mary's jar?
Oh yeah, I think that's a very strong possibility of that, because just months ago, the night before their mass arrest, or their mass burning, I guess, and there was 4 of them that snuck down off of that precipice with all kinds of sacred items and texts and so forth. And one of the things that they believe they left with was, the cup or the jar of Mary, And so So it is believed that it could be in that area. I mean, today we think that the Templars, of course, had many treasures that they had accumulated over time, and the two places that we are looking at is where those treasures are today. Is one is Rosslyn Chapel, and the other is in the Languedoc region. The Templars knew about that five-pointed star apparently because they actually built their commandery in Béziers, which was right on one of the 5 points.
Oh my goodness!
They knew all about it apparently.
So they knew right where to build.
Right. See, the goddess, the Gnostic alchemical tradition comes out of the goddess tradition. They're all interconnected. So if you get involved with one, you get involved with the others. I mean, the Templar's eight-pointed star is the ancient symbol of the goddess. It's also an alchemical symbol as well. You know, it shows the affiliation of the goddess, to alchemy, to gnosis, to all of them.
So now, did the Pope's army ever get their hands on the relics, or did they get snuck away?
Oh, this is 1307, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think the main thing they were looking for is the Baphomet. And the Baphomet is apparently was the head of John the Baptist that the Templars were able to find during the Fourth Crusade in Constantinople. They found it in a palace there, and they took it back into Europe, and they placed it on their highest altars. And it was like second in command, Hugh Parrod, I guess his name was. He carried it around all the different preceptories when they had special initiations. And apparently that head was still emanating the same kind of power it was when it was on the body of John the Baptist. And John was considered to be a master of this Holy Grail lineage, that he had incredible power, Kundalini power, Holy Spirit power at one point. And so in a lot of the Templar initiations, they had that head in proximity to them, and then they would absorb its power, its energy, and awaken their own inner Holy Grail power, their own inner Kundalini power, their own inner Holy Spirit power. But the thing of it is, one of the reasons the church wanted to get hold of it is because it's a symbol of that Johannite heresy. I believe that the church knew that there were two lines founded by Jesus. There was the St. Peter line, of course, but there was also the St. John, Mary Magdalene. That was the Gnostic line. That was the line that really received Jesus' spiritual power, you see. And they've always tried to wipe out that line. They've always known about it. All the secret societies, they were all alchemists and Gnostics. They all called themselves Templars, and they, in one way or another, they actually represented that alternative line. And you'll find throughout history that the church has always tried to destroy all these secret societies. They've always said, because they knew that they were always affiliated to that Gnostic, Johannite line.
Wow.
And if it came to light about the truth about it, then it would come to light that was the true lineage. It was the true lineage, and passed through St. Peter, it passed through John and Mary Magdalene.
All right. What about the Marian chalice? What's that?
Marian chalice was, I believe that was one that Empress Helena found when she went down to the Holy Land from Constantinople, and she had some workers with her, and they were digging around where they believed that Jesus' tomb was, I believe. And then they found pieces of the cross, and they found nails of the cross, and all kinds of things. This is it was because of that later on King Constantine was able to create this this sword or the spear of destiny out of those nails. But anyway, one of the things she found articles of the Passion, and she found this sort of Marian chalice thing, and
now what was it made out of?
Some say that was the true Holy Grail. That was at the Last Supper. That caught the blood and sweat of Jesus. That was the true one.
Now what was it made out of?
Well, that's the big question. You got people saying that it ended up in England. And it's made out of onyx. There's like one that's either black or white onyx, I guess. And they're saying, well, that's the Marian chalice. And no, it's made out of wood, and it's really the Nantios chalice, that was embedded in one of the walls of Glastonbury Abbey for many years, and now it's in Wales. And so nobody really knows for sure, but they do think that one way or another it found its way up to England, I guess.
Wow. Well, I mean, the Nantios Cup, let's see. Oh, gosh. Was made out of olive wood?
That's right, yeah.
And, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Was that King Henry VIII? Was that in his day?
That's right. He went around destroying all the monasteries.
Wow.
And so before he was able to, destroy Glastonbury Abbey, the monks took it out of its hiding place in one of the walls and left with it, and it ended up ended up with a family in Wales, I guess, and that's where it is today.
Well, we're speaking about Jesus relics, and you mentioned the tomb of Jesus, and recently I saw, I forget on which cable channel it was, but there was a special on a man who claims to have found the coffin and the bones of Jesus.
Right.
Have you got any thoughts about that? That's kind of current events.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you my thought on that one. In the East, rather than cremating a great teacher, great master when he dies, right, you entomb him. Why? Because their body continues to emanate out the spiritual energy that master accumulated while he was alive. And it'll continue to emanate that power for literally hundreds, thousands of years. Just like the head of John the Baptist supposedly emanated his power out of it a thousand years after John was gone, right?
Right.
So my belief is that that's the same with any master. Any master is going to their relics are going to be full of that power. You had the cult of the relics all over Europe, where every cathedral wanted to get a hold of some bone or some tooth of some prophet or some saint because it had power. It could heal you, And don't you think that if they had found the bones of Jesus, that there would be a heck of a lot of power coming out of those bones?
Well, I would think so. I would think, the cameras would have glitched, or there would have been some light coming out of the stone box or something. If there really is this Kundalini power, I couldn't think of anything that it would exist in.
Anybody that was at all sensitive would have been able to sense it entering that tomb or feeling those bones. And, I think that they would probably be so full of energy that you wouldn't be able to keep your feet if you were in the presence of them.
Yeah,
that's what I believe, because I've been around so many tombs of deceased masters. And
in about 6 minutes, this is Brooks Agnew with X Squared Radio, and my guest, Mark Pinkham.